Message important.
Важное объявление.
Anuncio importante.
يرجى من المتحدثين الكرام إلقاء بياناتهم بسرعة معقولة لضمان ترجمة فورية وافية وعالية الجودة.
为了帮助口译准确完整传递发言信息，请代表发言时语速不要过快。
Speakers are kindly reminded to deliver their statements at a reasonable pace to ensure complete and quality interpretation.
Il est rappelé aux orateurs qu'ils doivent présenter leur déclaration à un rythme raisonnable afin de garantir une interprétation complète et de qualité.
Напоминаем ораторам, что для того, чтобы устный перевод был полным и качественным, необходимо выступать в умеренном темпе.
Se ruega a los oradores que pronuncien sus declaraciones a un ritmo razonable para garantizar una interpretación íntegra y de calidad.
Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, I call to order the 9th meeting of the 60th session of the Human Rights Council. Before anything else, let me address an urgent matter regarding this 60th session. On the 10th of September 2025, I received 2 letters, one from the permanent representative of Pakistan on behalf of the member states of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, and the other from the permanent representative of the state of Kuwait on behalf of the Gulf Cooperation Council. Both letters request the holding of an urgent debate during this 60th session in order to discuss the recent military aggression carried out by the State of Israel against the State of Qatar on the 9th of September 2025. And that is a quote. These communications were immediately sent the very same day to all of the Council's members and observers. I would like to recall that urgent debates depend on a Council decision which adjusts the Council's programme of work in order to address a question that is deemed urgent. The reorganization of the programme of work is done at the request of a state or of a group of states. For your information, 9 urgent debates have been held to date within the Council, and in accordance with those precedents, the urgent debate would be held under Agenda Item 1 and would follow the modalities of a general debate. The debate could then be followed by the adoption of a resolution on the matter, as long as the main authors submit a draft resolution at least 24 hours prior to its adoption and hold at least one informal consultation. Upon reception of the letters from the permanent representatives of Pakistan and Kuwait, I consulted the Bureau on the issue. The Bureau concluded that the urgent debate could take place tomorrow, Tuesday, the 16th of September 2025 at 11 a.m. on the understanding that the Council would meet continuously from 9 to 6 p.m. that day. Before giving the floor to the distinguished representatives of Pakistan and Kuwait to introduce to the Council their request for this urgent debate, as well as any additional information on the matter, I would like to remind you that this is a decisional process and therefore only Council members may take the floor at this stage. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Pakistan on behalf of the member states of the Organization for Islamic Cooperation.
Thank you, Mr. President. The OIC group has sought an urgent debate at the ongoing HRC session to discuss the recent military aggression launched by Israel against the state of Qatar on 9 September 2025. The attack sought to disrupt the ongoing mediation process aimed at addressing the humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza, securing an immediate ceasefire and the release of captives. This illegal action has been condemned and strongly rejected by states as well as the UN Secretary General, Mr. Antonio Guterres, who condemned the attack, describing it as a flagrant violation of the sovereignty and territorial integrity of the state of Qatar. Joining the Secretary General's condemnation, UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Mr. Volker Turk, noted that such violence undermines peace efforts while killings and sufferings continue, only adding fuel to the fire. Mr. President, if left unaddressed, such flagrant and blatant violations of international law and the purposes and principles of the UN Charter entail serious impact on the enjoyment of all human rights, including, in particular, the right to life, liberty, and security of persons. We therefore request the Council to agree to convening this urgent debate without delay and affirming its abiding support for the primacy of international law and the enjoyment of all human rights. I thank you.
Merci.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Kuwait on behalf of the Gulf Cooperation Council. President, we would like to thank you, as well as the members of the Bureau, for having reacted so fast following our request to hold an urgent debate. An urgent debate would enable the Human Rights Council to address this major issue on the 9th of September 2020, that took place on 9th of September 2025, when Qatar was the target of a brutal attack by the Israeli forces. This was a violation of the sovereignty of a member state of the United Nations, of the Human Rights Council, and of the Gulf Cooperation Council and of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. This aggression was condemned by many international and regional actors, including the UN Secretary General and the High Commissioner for Human Rights. And the Security Council issued a president's statement condemning this act of aggression, which exacerbates tensions in a region affected by successive crises. We condemn in the most categoric terms this violation, which sets a dangerous precedent and undermines the regional security and peace and international security and peace. It leads to humanitarian and security consequences and undermines the promotion of human rights. And we would like to recall the constructive role played by the state of Qatar in terms of mediation and dispute settlement and for restoring stability, which helped stem the bloodshed in many states, among many peoples. Aggressing such a state sends a message whereby attempts to settle disputes through peaceful means are not welcome. The Human Rights Council, according to its mandate from General Assembly Decision 60-251, is called upon to protect and promote human rights and to address all gross violations of international law. That is why holding an urgent debate within the Council would send a clear message emphasizing that violating the sovereignty of states and threatening international peace and security is reprehensible and could undermine the pillars of international security and of human rights, and that defending the principles of international law and human rights is a responsibility that we must all shoulder and also represents the essence of this Council's mandate. Thank you.
Merci. Nous allons...
Thank you. We will now hear from the states concerned. I note that the delegation of Israel is not present in the room. I would like to give the floor to her, the distinguished representative of Qatar.
In the name of God, the compassionate and merciful, Mr. President, we have clarified the objectives behind holding this urgent debate in the two letters sent to you by the permanent representative of Pakistan on behalf of member states of the OIC and the permanent representative of Kuwait on behalf of the GCC states in Geneva. President, on the 9th of September, my country has been subjected to a barbaric and treacherous attack by Israel while hosting public and official negotiations claiming innocent lives. A residential neighborhood was attacked where there are schools, diplomatic missions, and mosques. This attack, let alone being a violation of the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Qatar, represents a clear breach of the Charter of the United Nations and the international, the rules of international law, human rights, and the principles of mediation. My country, the active member of your Council, the United Nations, and the OIC, as well as the GCC, has been subjected to this blatant violation and attack because of its role as a mediator that hosts negotiations and facilitates dialogue in order to reach a ceasefire and to prioritize negotiation over the barbaric logic of force that caused organized crime, war crimes, and crimes against humanity, as well as violations of human rights. And ironically, my country is being rewarded for this noble role by being subjected to a treacherous attack by the same party that my country is trying to release its prisoners, and we have been trying to help them to reach a peaceful settlement. This terrorist and armed attack against my country at a time when we are hosting negotiations and negotiators is a clear message by the implementing party that it does not recognize negotiations or dialogue or gives no heeds to the lives of innocent people, even the lives of its own people. The Prime Minister is pushing Israel towards a global isolation, turning it into a rogue state. And this attack on my country reiterates or demonstrates that they were not negotiating in good faith, but were meddling with the security of the region. Peace-loving countries should denounce this barbaric act and this intransigence that is outdated. It is an opportunity for the Human Rights Council to assume its responsibility to promote respect for all human rights values in accordance with GA Resolution 6251. We look forward to this urgent debate on Tuesday to demonstrate the seriousness and sincerity of this council to address the consequences of this treacherous attack on human rights, which is another vicious circle and another pattern of violations and crimes perpetrated by Israel in the region for decades in view of inability by the international community to address them. Last message, Israel should know that this legitimacy or this force that is devoid of legitimacy will never make stability or peace. Who plants senselessness will reap devastation. Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you. Are there any other delegations who would like to take the floor concerning the holding of the urgent debate? I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Algeria.
I have the pleasure to take the floor on behalf of the Arab Group. The Arab Group expressed its strong support for the call made by the OIC Group and the members of the Gulf Cooperation Council for the convening of an urgent debate within the Human Rights Council to address this alarming development. We believe that the Council, under your leadership, must fulfill its responsibility to uphold international peace and protect human rights by urgently examining the legal and humanitarian implication of this act of aggression and taking the necessary measures to prevent its recurrence. Thank you, Chair.
Merci. Je donne la parole.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Kyrgyzstan.
Thank you, Mr. President. Kyrgyzstan condemns in the most categoric terms the aggression against the fraternal nation of Qatar. we welcome the urgent debate of the Human Rights Council, which we hope will contribute to stop the barbaric logic of force and war. Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you. I see no further requests for the floor. May I take it that the Council approves the Bureau's proposal to hold the urgent debate in order to discuss the recent military aggression carried out by Israel against the state of Qatar on the 9th of September 2025 on Tuesday, the 16th of September at 11 a.m.? I see no objection. It is so decided. Thank you. Regarding the modalities for the urgent debate, the Bureau would like to recall that urgent debates follow the modalities of general debates and that, therefore, speaking times would be limited to 5 minutes for each state concerned and to 1 minute 30 seconds for all other speakers. Member states and observers, as well as national human rights institutions and non-governmental organizations with ECOSOC consultative status, may take part in person or via pre-recorded video message. In accordance with the practice followed during general debates, the Bureau has agreed that the list of speakers for NGOs will be decided on the basis of the average number of speakers from the last 3 urgent debates. The online registration system for the list of speakers will open on Monday, the 15th of September at 2 p.m. for states, NGOs, and other observers. If approved by the Council, these extraordinary modalities will apply exclusively to this urgent debate and should not set a precedent. Are there any delegations who would like to take the floor concerning the extraordinary modalities for the urgent debate? I see no requests for the floor. May I take it that the Council accepts that the proposed extraordinary modalities be applied during the urgent debate in order to, and I quote, discuss the recent military aggression by the State of Israel against the State of Qatar carried out on the 9th of September 2025, end of quote. This debate will take place on Tuesday, the 16th of September 2025. I see no objections. It is so decided. Thank you.
Chers collègues, nous allons...
Colleagues, we'll now take a very short break before beginning the panel discussion on the fight against discrimination and violence and harmful practices against intersex persons.
Excellences, distingués.
Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, we will now begin the panel discussion on combating discrimination, violence and harmful practices against intersex persons in accordance with Resolution 55/14 of the Council. This meeting is accessible to persons with disabilities thanks to measures including the interpretation in sign language and real-time captioning. I have the honor of welcoming Ms. Nada Al-Nashif, Deputy High Commissioner for Human Rights, who will deliver the opening statement. I also have the honor of welcoming Ms. Pramila Patten, Special Representative of the Secretary General regarding sexual violence committed during times of conflict, and she will also deliver an opening statement. Allow me also to welcome our distinguished panelists, Ms. Tlaleng Mofokeng, Special Rapporteur on the right to physical and mental health. She will deliver a video message. Mr. Jeff Kagandahan, Executive Director of Intersex Philippines and member of the Board of Administration of Intersex Asia. Ms. Andrea Albali Irureta Goyena, Deputy Secretary for Public Health in Chile, and Mr. Yuri de Boer, who is the chair of an expert committee of the Steering Committee on Combating Discrimination and Ensuring Diversity and Inclusion within the Council of Europe. Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, the list of speakers will close in 15 minutes. I would like to encourage all speakers to intervene in an interactive way and ask questions and make comments that reflect the statements given by the panelists and the discussion itself. Speaking time is limited to 1 minute 30 seconds for all speakers, and a maximum of 40 speakers will be accommodated. Delegates who are registered on the list of speakers and who do not have the opportunity to take the floor due to a lack of time will be able to upload their statements, and these will be posted on the extranet. I now have the honor of giving the floor to Deputy High Commissioner for her opening statement. Thank you.
Thank you,
President.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Intersex people are born with sex characteristics that do not fit typical definitions for male or female bodies, including sexual anatomy, reproductive organs, and hormonal or chromosome patterns. They have natural variations in human sex traits, and they exist in all societies. While they have varied experiences, they share a common challenge. Around the world, they often face discrimination, stigma, and even violence. There are still far too little understandings and awareness of who intersex people are and the issues that they face. And my office therefore welcomes the Council's initiative on mandating this report and adopting a resolution that specifically addresses their human rights. Recent surveys in Europe and Latin America found that between 1/5 and 1/3 of intersex respondents experienced violence, including physical and sexual attacks. Civil society organizations representing intersex people report vandalism of their offices and events, threats against community members, and online harassment. Medically unnecessary interventions are frequently performed on intersex infants and children without their full, free, and informed consent. As noted by the World Health Organization, these are often carried out for cosmetic reasons or because of outdated beliefs that are not supported by medical research. Tragically, for the people involved, this may lead to sterilization and to lifelong pain and emotional suffering. Intersex people experience discrimination in healthcare, in education, in employment, and housing. One survey in East Africa found that 90% of intersex youth interviewed had dropped out of school due to discrimination from peers and teachers. And several sporting bodies have adopted measures that exclude women with innate variations in sex characteristics from competition. In most cases, intersex people struggle to access justice. The reasons for this include the expiry of statutes of limitations and the lack of access to medical records. Mr. President, the root causes of discrimination and harmful practices against intersex people lie in widespread stereotypes, misconceptions, misinformation, stigma, and taboo. This starts from the very beginning of their lives, when parents often receive incomplete or misleading information about their newborn intersex child. My office's report shows that changing these misconceptions and ending discrimination and abuse against intersex people is possible, and we highlight promising practices around the world. 7 member states have taken measures to prohibit medically unnecessary or non-urgent interventions on intersex children without consent. 16 have implemented measures to prohibit discrimination. We call on others to follow their lead and to engage with intersex people and organizations to understand how to protect and promote their rights more fully. Our report provides practical, concrete recommendations, including promising practices to end violence and hate crimes against intersex children and adults, to investigate the human rights violations they face, and to ensure accountability for victims. All states need to ban medically unnecessary interventions to modify the sex characteristics of intersex people without their full, free, and informed consent, also aligning health protocols and procedures with human rights standards. The report recommends that states explicitly prohibit discrimination on the basis of sex characteristics, including in education, in employment, health, housing, sports, and access to services. States must also raise awareness to end damaging stereotypes, misconceptions, misinformation, stigma, and taboos against intersex people. And they need to consult intersex human rights defenders in the design and development of laws and policies that affect their human rights. The courage of intersex human rights defenders has driven change around the world, despite the very limited funding that they receive. And my office very much encourages you all to support them and their organizations. Our office will continue to advocate for an end to violence, to discrimination, and to harmful practices against intersex people. I urge that we build on this work so that intersex people can enjoy all human rights and freedoms around the world as we together deliver on our promise to leave no one behind. Thank you, Mr. President.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, dear colleagues. I announced that there would be a second statement by Ms. Pramila Patten, Special Representative of the Secretary General on sexual violence in times of conflict. I do apologize, that is a mistake on our behalf. She will not be intervening today. So I will now give the floor to the panelists for their opening statements, and I would like to invite Ms. Tlaleng Mofokeng to deliver her speech via video message.
We have no sound.
Excellencies, dear friends, it is an honor to address the Human Rights Council's first panel discussion on combating discrimination, violence, and harmful practices against intersex persons. I welcome the Council's decision to address the human rights of intersex people, including the right to health, and of course the High Commissioner's report represented to this session. This is a topic on which there is too little awareness still and too many misconceptions and inaccurate information. I have regularly addressed in the different working methods afforded to me the right to health of intersex persons, including through my thematic reports, as have my predecessors, and during my country visits. As emphasized by my mandate and the Committee on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, the right to health includes the right to control and make decisions on one's body and health free of violence, coercion, and discrimination. It extends to effective protection from all forms of violence, and it also requires preventative, promotional, and remedial action to shield individuals from such harmful practices or norms and gender-based violence that deny them their full sexual and reproductive health. In this regard, the most critical concern that I and others have raised is the issue of violence and harmful practices against intersex persons in medical contexts and settings, and in particular, medically unnecessary, irreversible, and involuntary surgery and treatment performed on intersex infants or children, and how this has an impact on those individuals in their adulthood. As a medical practitioner, as an independent expert, intersex persons have highlighted to me the suffering caused by these interventions. It also includes sterilization, trauma, incontinence, scarring, loss of sexual function, and harm to mental health. Now, the obligation of states to respect human rights requires that they refrain from directly or indirectly interfering with the right to health, including refraining from applying coercive medical treatments such as involuntary surgery on intersex persons, including on infants or children who are intersex. The obligation of states to protect the right to health requires that they also take all measures to prevent third parties from carrying out such harmful practices, including enacting laws and enforcing laws and policies prohibiting these practices and prosecuting those who are perpetrators. I welcome the research carried out by the WHO, which highlights that medically unnecessary interventions are often carried out for cosmetic reasons or rationales that are not supported by medical literature or need, or shockingly, without any rationale provided at all as to the conduct and timing of these procedures. It is important to emphasize that my mandate on the right to health has raised concerns about procedures that are medically unnecessary. And of course, some intersex children, like other children, do sometimes require medical intervention to support their physical health and well-being. And the report of the High Commissioner provides such examples. But make no mistake, colleagues, that there is no health rationale for cosmetic surgery on the genitals and bodies of intersex children and neonates to make them fit societal stereotypes, just as there is no rationale for female genital mutilation. In both cases, for example, these are forms of violence and harmful practices that violate children's right to health, bodily autonomy, physical and psychological integrity, and can lead to long suffering in their life. It is important that intersex children and adults should be the only ones who decide whether they wish to modify any parts of their bodies, and in the case of children, when they are old or mature enough to make those informed decisions themselves. Excellencies, dear friends and colleagues, human rights violations can be prevented. The right to health as a framework is solution-oriented, and as I embark on perhaps the last few months of my own tenure, the preventative nature of human rights is something that I want to spotlight. Importantly, we must urge states to move to implement the recommendations, the good practices with each other in collaboration, and importantly, in support of medical and health institutions and medical expertise and healthcare workers to be able to be advocates to protect and to promote and to advance the rights of intersex people. It is very important to also note that in many of my country visits, a lot of health practitioners and health professions bodies have, after my visit, asked for support and assistance in updating practices and protocols. So this shows examples of how, on the one hand, civil society organizations with trustful partnerships with states and governments can work with the human rights system to prevent violations, to uphold the human rights of intersex people, including their right to health. My mandate remains available and capable and willing to provide any support to all of you as all of us move to advance the human rights of intersex people, to ensure that violence is not the first experience of many children of being human. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. I give the floor to Jeff Kagandahan for his statement.
Thank you, Mr. President. Excellencies and friends, thank you for this opportunity to speak at this historic event. I am Jeff Kagandahan, an intersex person from the Philippines. Resolution 5514, adopted by this Council, this panel discussion, and the OHCHR report, mark a historic moment. The first time that this Council discusses the human rights violation that intersex people face. To be clear, an intersex person is born with variations in sex characteristics that do not fit the typical definitions of male or female bodies. Despite being a naturally occurring aspect of human diversity, intersex persons, including myself, are often invisible in society and subject to a range of harmful practices and discriminatory policies that affect our lives in profound ways. As documented in the report, the impact of discriminatory laws and policies against intersex persons is far-reaching. It is not only in the healthcare sector where we are mistreated, but it extends to our access to education, employment, and healthcare, as well as our ability to exercise legal capacity and access justice. In many countries, intersex persons are excluded in mainstream society, with their needs often ignored or misunderstood. Access to essential medicines is one such major challenge in several countries, including the Philippines, which needs coordination from multiple stakeholders, and yet it is not being prioritized by governments. One of the most pressing issues is the violence and harmful practices that intersex persons face, particularly the unnecessary and irreversible medical interventions that are performed on us without our consent and without fully informing us about the risks and consequences. These harmful interventions are carried out in the name of normalization or fixing our bodies to fit societal expectations. But what they fail to recognize is a right to bodily autonomy and self-determination. Intersex variations are simply some of the many ways the human body can develop. This brings us to the core issue we must confront: the root causes of discrimination and harm we face. Medical practices, societal stigma, and harmful policies contributing to the poor physical and mental health outcomes for intersex individuals are often rooted in misconceptions, inaccurate information, and harmful cultural norms. What we need is greater awareness, education, and understanding. We need to dismantle the myths and misconceptions about intersex persons. We need to raise awareness about the rights of intersex individuals to be who we are without fear of discrimination or violence. Further, we must also work toward more effective legal frameworks. The Intersex Legal Mapping Report from ILGA World has noted that more than 90% of the UN member states fail to legally protect rights of intersex people, leaving us vulnerable to discrimination, violence, and harmful medical practices. We must advocate for laws that not only prohibit non-consensual surgeries and treatments, but also ensure that intersex persons have access to justice and remedies when our rights are violated. The global intersex movement has made a significant stride in defining our priorities. The Malta Declaration, a landmark document representing the consensus of the global intersex movement, provides a clear roadmap. It is a unified goal for an end to harmful medical practices and for our full legal and social inclusion. This collective call to action resulted in Malta becoming the first state to pass groundbreaking legislation that prohibits unnecessary medical interventions on intersex children. Since then, A number of countries in Africa, Asia Pacific, Latin America, the Caribbean, and Europe have taken measures to protect the human rights of intersex persons, demonstrating growing recognition across the world. So, where do we go from here? The OHCHR reports provide a blueprint, but action is our shared responsibility. I ask of you today, listen to intersex people, partner with our organizations, and support legislation that protects our bodily integrity and ensures full legal recognition that intersex people exist and are part of the community and deserve access to human rights without discrimination as everyone else. This is how we will move from a conversation about violations to a future of rights and dignity. Thank you and mabuhay.
Merci.
Thank you. I now give the floor to Andrea Albagli, Urureta Goyena.
Gracias.
Thank you, President. Excellencies, participants. First of all, I wanted to thank you for giving us this opportunity to tell you about the experience of the state of Chile in its combat against discrimination, violence, and harmful practices against intersex persons. The situation of intersex persons in Chile has been an issue of great concern for our government and for our state, particularly as regards the medical procedures which were carried out on boys and girls with intersex variations. For a very long time, surgical and hormonal procedures that are irreversible were carried out on infants without their consent and with the aim of bringing their bodies into line with binary gender standards. These early procedures were based on a pathologizing view of bodily variations. They've been called into question by the global medical community, and what is more important, they have been questioned by intersex persons and their families. The government of Chile decided to take measures in order to protect the right to health of intersex children, given the evidence that these early procedures are, in the majority of cases, not necessary, medically speaking, and they cause significant harm in the long term. These effects include loss of feeling in the genitals, infertility, urinary problems, and have a deep psychological and emotional impact on identity. The decision to regulate this issue by means of a circular was grounded on the protection of bodily autonomy, the right to physical integrity, and informed consent, which are essential principles underpinning human rights and the right to health. Ministerial Circular number 15 of the 7th of November 2023, issued by the Ministry of Health, is titled Instructions for Public Health Service Facilities, ensuring they adopt measures to safeguard the comprehensive health of intersex persons, was a circular which was a great watershed in our countries. It was put together in a collaborative, participative manner. The government worked closely with civil society organizations, academia, and health practitioners. The expertise and the testimonials which were presented were key in order to give the issues visibility and to put in place public policy, which was human rights centers. The work to draft Circular 15 took place between August 2022 and September 2023, and it was promoted by an evaluation carried out by the Committee on the Rights of the Child, a body which recommended that the state of Chile update its technical and clinical documentation in order to protect intersex children, ensuring that children are not subjected to medical or surgical procedures if they are purely cosmetic or carried out for social reasons. And this brought about the updating and repealing of previous circulars from 2015 and 2016. So the circular was produced in an intersectoral manner with representatives of the Ministry of Health, as well as participation of civil societies, such as NGOs called Chile Intersex. And there were also participants from academia and experts from pediatric urology and the Genetic Society of Chile. In simple terms, the goal is to prohibit surgical procedures in children that are proved to be purely aesthetic or grounded in social reasons. And Chile has therefore become one of the pioneering countries in terms of protecting those that have sexual bodily variations at birth. It is a document which provides health practitioners to ensure that families, carers, and legal representatives have better access, ensuring that persons are trained to know that sex characteristic variations are infrequent, and therefore we must manage the uncertainty for children and members of their families. The circular was implemented at different levels. We provided information to all national health service facilities, instructing them to postpone any surgical irreversible procedure on newborns that have intersex variations unless there is a risk to life or something which would seriously harm their health. We promote the provision of comprehensive information, which is clear information to families. We're training health teams and ensuring that decisions are taken together, that they are consensual, ensuring that the focus is always comprehensive health. This is a circular giving instructions to the Public Health Service, and these are binding instructions to health facilities. Currently, in 2025, we are strengthening and updating our system. We are raising awareness and training our different institutions, including 16 regional secretariats and 29 health services. We're establishing contact points and developing oversight capacities throughout the country. The impact of this circular has been significant. We now have a fora for dialogue between medical teams and the families, ensuring that decisions can be taken on an informed basis and they are respectful. We have progressed in recognition of intersexuality as a natural bodily variation and not as a pathology which requires correcting. However, we're still facing challenges. Disinformation persists in some sectors of the medical community, and there is a cultural resistance to leave behind practices which are deeply entrenched, and this continues to be a barrier. Also, the monitoring and oversight of the circular throughout the country requires ongoing efforts. We are therefore training health personnel. We are creating guiding frameworks and promoting space for dialogue. So to conclude, I wish to turn to other states which are exploring how to protect the rights of intersex persons in the healthcare system. Our experience shows us that the path ahead is paved with cooperation and active listening, involving civil society, especially intersex persons themselves, in putting in place public policy is essential to ensure that what is done is effective and respectful. The protection of the rights of intersex persons is not based on ideology. It is rather a public health imperative and a health imperative based on evidence and human rights. This is a call to caution in the medical sector. It's a call for empathy and the respect for diversity in human bodies. Thank you.
Merci. Je donne la parole.
Thank you. I now give the floor to Yuri de Boer.
Thank you, Mr. President. Excellencies, friends, colleagues, my name is Yuri de Boer. I chair a Council of Europe expert committee addressing the human rights of intersex persons, operating under the Steering Committee on Anti-Discrimination, Diversity and Inclusion. As part of our mandate, we have drafted a recommendation, the first international legal instrument devoted specifically to intersex persons, pending adoption by the Committee of Ministers next month. Why this instrument and why now? Because despite long-standing concerns voiced by Council of Europe bodies, including the Commissioner for Human Rights, the Parliamentary Assembly, and the European Commission Against Racism and Intolerance, as well as other European and international institutions and civil society, across our region, intersex persons continue to face a pattern of harms. These harms include medically unnecessary interventions performed without the person's prior, free, informed, and expressed consent, obstacles to obtaining medical records, and barriers to justice and remedy, violence, bullying, as well as discrimination in education, employment, housing, and healthcare. The UN High Commissioner's report before this session also traces these violations as well as their root causes. The explanatory memorandum accompanying our draft Council of Europe recommendation sets out the background, evidence, international human rights framework, and practical guidance, as well as examples to support implementation by member states. It notes how intersex people face elevated violence, harassment, and discrimination, driven by entrenched stereotypes and gaps in hate crime and hate speech law, as well as equality protections. The text is also informed by positive developments. 6 Council of Europe member states prohibit non-consensual normalizing medical interventions on variations of sex characteristics in law, and others have other restrictions. More states are incorporating the ground of sex characteristics in hate crime and hate speech provisions and equality frameworks, action plans, and the mandates of national equality and human rights bodies. The draft recommendation and its explanatory memorandum are built on existing Council of Europe standards, as well as case law of the European Court of Human Rights, pairing human rights standards with practical tools for oversight. It reflects a broad and inclusive consultative process, drawing on lived experience of intersex persons, as well as medical and ethical expertise. One of its core pillars is the legal prohibition of medical interventions on the sex characteristics of intersex persons without their prior, free, and informed consent. This responds to long-standing concerns voiced by the Council of Europe that such interventions, often performed in infancy or early childhood, violate rights to bodily integrity, autonomy, and dignity. To that end, the draft recommendation outlines very clearly that interventions which are not strictly necessary to avert an imminent threat to life or serious physical harm should be postponed until the individual can provide personal and informed consent. Moreover, it establishes stringent procedural safeguards in the rare cases where interventions may be considered before a child reaches maturity. These safeguards include comprehensive information, consultation, independent oversight, and robust documentation to ensure the child's best interests and that the right to express their views are respected according to age and maturity. It also recognizes that discrimination and harm do not begin or end in the hospital or operating theater. It outlines principles for protecting intersex persons across key life domains: birth registration and legal gender recognition, access to justice and remedies, protections from hate crime and hate speech, inclusive education, family life, and access to healthcare, employment, and sport. This comprehensive approach addresses structural and intersectional discrimination faced by intersex persons throughout their lives. The draft also emphasizes the need for member states to develop evidence-based national legal and policy frameworks, to gather data disaggregated by sex characteristics, to train professionals across sectors, particularly in health, education, and justice, and to provide intersex people and their families with adequate information and support, including access to peer-led networks, ensuring that intersex persons can meaningfully participate in these democratic processes. The Council of Europe's strength lies not only in setting standards, but in supporting its member states in applying them through assistance and cooperation. In short, this recommendation could offer a robust normative framework and a practical roadmap for states to respect, protect, and fulfill the rights of intersex persons in a comprehensive and sustainable manner. In shaping our recommendation, we drew on the work of the United Nations treaty bodies, the CRC, CAT, the Human Rights Committee, CRPD, and CEDAW. We also recognize the valuable reports and guidance of the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights and the African Commission on Humans and People's Rights. We see strong value in structured exchanges and standard setting, case law and clinical guidance, and are ready to collaborate and share good practices. It is our firm belief that those whose rights are at stake must be recognized not as passive recipients, but as active agents in shaping the policies and laws that affect their lives. From the outset, drafting has been rooted in engagement with intersex persons and intersex-led organizations, whose insights, expertise, and testimonies have been central to the text. The recommendation would encourage member states to ensure that intersex persons and organizations working on intersex human rights are included in the full policy cycle, from the development of policies to the implementation and evaluation. This requires mechanisms that embed intersex voices into the institutional fabric, such as advisory councils and formalized partnerships. One-off consultations are not sufficient. Participation must be structured, adequately resourced, and sustained. In conclusion, Mr. President, the Council of Europe and our expert committee stand ready with guidance, legislative support, and peer learning to make these standards real in people's lives. Thank you for your attention.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. We can now begin the first segment of our speakers list. The speakers list is now closed, and it is an honor for me to give the floor to Her Excellency Ms. Katrín Kunnardóttir, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Iceland, for a video statement.
Mr. President, I have the honor to speak on behalf of the Nordic Baltic countries. We remain deeply concerned about the persistent human rights violations faced by the intersex persons. Too often, intersex persons are subjected to irreversible and medically unnecessary interventions without their full, free, and informed consent, sometimes in early childhood. These practices must end. States have a clear obligation to prohibit harmful practices, eliminate discrimination, and ensure accountability for violations against all persons. We echo the recommendations of the OHCHR report. All states should adopt and enforce laws and policies that protect bodily integrity and autonomy, regulate medical practices, and ensure access to justice and effective remedies. Crucially, all measures must be developed in close consultation with intersex persons and their organizations, ensuring that their voices and lived experiences shape the decisions that affect their lives. We call on all states to uphold their obligations under international human rights law and to work together to guarantee the dignity, autonomy, and equality of intersex persons everywhere.
Merci. Je donne...
Thank you. I now give the floor to the UNDP on behalf of a group of countries.
Thank you, Mr. President. This statement is delivered on behalf of UNDP, UNAIDS, UNFPA, and UN Women. We welcome the resolution, OHCHR's report, and the panel discussion for bringing attention to and promoting dialogue in advancing the human rights of intersex persons. As United Nations entities committed to the 2030 Agenda, we also affirm our commitment to pursuing action for the protection and promotion of the human rights of intersex persons and their inclusion in sustainable development efforts, in line with our respective mandates and as appropriate. Intersex persons globally continue to face stigma and discrimination rooted in social norms, gender stereotypes, and misconceptions about intersex bodies. Intersex persons are frequently subjected to medically unnecessary interventions that violate their right to bodily autonomy and physical integrity. Intersex newborns have been victims of baby abandonment and infanticide. Over the course of their lives, intersex persons also commonly face discrimination in accessing health services that address their specific needs. Intersecting forms of discrimination are also far common in education, employment, sports, and other sectors. They face obstacles in birth registration and in obtaining or amending identity documents, which limit access to public services, political participation, and more. We strongly encourage states and other actors to implement the recommendations in the OHCHR report. As UN agencies, we stand ready to support member states and communities in translating the recommendations in the report into actionable country-level policies and programs. I thank you very much.
Merci, je donne la parole.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Finland on behalf of a group of countries.
President, I have the honor to deliver this statement on behalf of the core group of the resolution on intersex persons, consisting of Australia, Chile, South Africa, and my own country, Finland. Today's panel is a milestone for the Human Rights Council in raising awareness of the human rights situation of intersex persons. That is, individuals who are simply born with sex characteristics that do not fit the typical definition of male or female bodies. We remain deeply concerned that across the globe, intersex persons experience stigmatization and multiple human rights violations and abuses in all areas of life. This is unacceptable. However, let us be encouraged by several promising national and regional practices that stand out as good models for protecting the human rights of intersex individuals, particularly in ensuring bodily autonomy, legal recognition, and protection for discrimination and violence. The report calls on all of us to learn and do better to uphold our obligations under international human rights law and to combat human rights violations, harmful practices, and hate speech against intersex persons, both online and offline. Violations and abuses should be thoroughly investigated and perpetrators should be held accountable. Today, more than ever, we must redouble our efforts to guarantee equal protection, respect, and fulfillment of all human rights of all.
Thank you. I now give the floor to Austria on behalf of a group of countries.
Thank you. I deliver this statement on behalf of Croatia, Slovenia, and my own country, Austria. We welcome today's panel discussion on combating discrimination, violence, and harmful practices against intersex persons. We believe it is important to raise awareness in the society at large to counter stereotypes, misconceptions, and misinformation. Every person is entitled to equal protection, respect, and fulfillment of all human rights as enshrined in the UNHRC and the VDPA and international human rights treaties. We thank OHCHR for the report and recommendations, notably on medical interventions and further upholding the right to health. Effective access to services prevents social exclusion and marginalization. Many positive legislative and policy changes have resulted from advocacy by and in partnerships with civil society organizations. These include legislation prohibiting the performance of medically unnecessary interventions on intersex persons without their full, free, and informed consent, providing the possibility of an administrative procedure to amend the gender marker in official records and documents, and prohibiting and combating hate speech and or incitement to violence, hatred, or discrimination based on sex characteristics. Dear panelists, updating legislation is a crucial step. However, eradicating discrimination and stigmatization takes time. Could you elaborate how states can better share best practices and lessons learned to counter the root causes of...
Thank you. I give the floor to the European Union.
Monsieur le Président, the European Union thanks the panelists for their interventions and the OHCHR for its report and the convening of this panel. The EU strongly opposes all forms of violence and discrimination. We remain gravely concerned that in all regions of the world, intersex persons face stigma and multiple and intersecting human rights violations and abuses in all areas of life. These violations include, among others, infanticide, violence, medically unnecessary interventions performed without full, free, and informed consent, as well as discrimination and barriers to accessing justice and remedy. Stereotypes, misconceptions, and misinformation resulting in harmful beliefs and stigma are some of the major root causes for these violations and abuses. According to the report, so far fewer than 10% of states have enacted comprehensive anti-discrimination laws that explicitly include sex characteristics as a prohibited ground for discrimination. However, there are promising practices both nationally and at regional level to combat discrimination and marginalization and to prevent violence and harmful practices against intersex persons. The European Parliament has strongly condemned sex normalizing treatments and surgeries and encouraged states to prohibit them. The role of civil society organizations is crucial in promoting positive legislative and policy changes as well as destigmatization. Likewise, it is important that intersex persons can safely report human rights violations against them and that the perpetrators are held accountable. Dear panelists, what are the most urgent steps that states can take to prevent violations against intersex persons?
Merci. Je
I
donne la
thank you.
parole à la distinguée.
Thank you. I give the floor to Luxembourg.
Monsieur le Président, I am speaking on behalf of the Benelux countries, Belgium, the Netherlands, and Luxembourg. The Benelux fully supports the statement made by the European Union. The Benelux reaffirms its commitment to promoting and protecting the human rights of all persons, including intersex persons. The experience of intersex persons remains largely marginalized from public discourse, even though it raises crucial concerns related to human rights, healthcare, and social recognition. Too often, intersex persons face silent discrimination, stigmatization, and institutional invisibility that hinders their identity and dignity. We are proud to have been among the first signatories of Human Rights Council Resolution 5514, combating discrimination, violence, and harmful practices against intersex persons. This resolution clearly defines intersexuality, condemns unnecessary and non-consensual medical interventions on intersex children, and calls on states to guarantee the bodily integrity, self-determination, and dignity of people born with variations in sex characteristics. We encourage all states to enhance efforts to combat discrimination, violence, and harmful practices against intersex persons and to address their root causes. Today, we reaffirm our commitment to fostering a better understanding of the lived experience of
Merci. Je donne la
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Chile on behalf of a group of countries. Thank you very much, President. I have the honor of speaking on behalf of a group of Latin American countries whose full list can be found on the extranet. This panel is a milestone. It is the first time that the Human Rights Council dedicates a forum for intersex persons. It is an opportunity for us to recognize their experiences, to lend visibility to the challenges they face, and above all, to move ahead together towards equality and full inclusion. Intersex persons continue to be exposed to practices that violate their fundamental rights, such as medical procedures without consent and persistent barriers to access to education, healthcare, and social protection. These situations are not isolated incidents. They reflect prejudices and legal gaps that call for decisive and coordinated responses at the international level. Our commitment at the international level is to promote conditions that guarantee that all intersex persons can enjoy the highest possible level of physical and mental health. This requires healthcare services that act with respect and without discrimination. It requires professionals to be trained on human rights and procedures that always guarantee free, prior, and informed consent as well as adequate support. Today, we reiterate our call for transforming laws, policies, and practices in order to build societies that respect and protect the dignity and human rights of all persons. To aim for the well-being of intersex persons is to aim for more humane, inclusive communities. Thank you.
Merci. Je donne la parole.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Canada.
Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. Canada would like to thank the panel for its presentation, and we thank the High Commissioner's Office for the report. Intersex persons exist and have the right to equal protection and the full realization of their fundamental rights on an equal footing as non-intersex persons. And yet intersex persons continue to be victims around the world, in particular infanticide, violence, and discrimination in the fields of education, healthcare, employment, housing, sport, and access to services. Canada has taken measures to promote the rights of intersex people, in particular by supporting civil society organizations that strive to promote equality. Yet we do recognise that additional measures are required, and we will continue to work in order to promote equality for all. According to what does the panel think? How can member states and international partners step up their cooperation and bolster capacities so as to remove violations against intersex persons around the world? Thank you. Thank you. I would like to give the floor back to the distinguished representative of Chile. Thank you, President. First of all, we would like to extend a greeting to the Undersecretary for Public Health, Ms. Andrea Albagli. We welcome her presentation, which highlighted the measures taken by Chile regarding the protection of intersex persons. We would also like to welcome the report presented by the Office, which lays bare an alarming reality. In all regions, intersex persons continue to be the target of systematic human rights violations. And these are not isolated facts, but patterns which correlate with stigma and prejudice that seek to erase corporal diversity, thus perpetuating a cycle of violence, invisibility, and exclusion. The lack of adequate legal frameworks exacerbates the situation. More than 90% of states have still not taken specific measures to protect intersex persons. Yet, measures with immediate effect can be taken. It is possible to prohibit unnecessary medical procedures that do not have consent, and you can recognize the sexual characteristics as a protected category against discrimination and ensure access to justice and reparation. This council needs to raise its voice against these forms of violence. We're not talking about abstract figures, but of lives that have been truncated in the name of normality. Ensuring intersex a life free from violence and discrimination is a necessary obligation.
Merci.
Thank you. I now give the floor to Malta.
Thank you, Mr. President. We thank the panelists for their presentations and OHCHR for the report. No child should be forced into medical procedures that strip them of their dignity or deny their right to self-determination. This principle guided Malta in 2015 when it became the first UN member state to enact legislation specifically protecting the rights of intersex persons. Our law prohibits medically unnecessary and non-consensual surgeries on intersex children, safeguarding their right to bodily integrity. We are pleased that the report identified Malta as one of the countries that protects the rights of intersex persons and prohibits discriminatory practices. This decision has been made with the recognition that the individual is the rights holder and that the state has the duty to promote and protect human rights. Since adopting this framework, our society has become more inclusive, respecting the choices of intersex persons, empowering them in their daily lives, and helping to reduce stigma and intolerance. We will continue to stand with intersex persons until equality and dignity are secured for all. Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you. I give the floor to South Africa.
Mr. President, South Africa welcomes the Human Rights Council's report on and commends the High Commissioner for the thoughtful and timely reflection on the lived realities of intersex persons globally. We are proud to be part of the core group in leading the landmark resolution, a historic step towards affirming the dignity, bodily autonomy, and rights of intersex individuals. We reiterate our commitment to the principles enshrined in that resolution, which resonate with the enshrined in our Constitution that protects and upholds equality and non-discrimination based on sex. South Africa believes that every person, regardless of their sex characteristics, must enjoy the highest attainable standard of physical and mental health, be free from discrimination, coercion, and violence. We remain deeply concerned by the persistence of harmful practices, including non-consensual medical interventions, especially on intersex children, and call for urgent action to end these violations. We're encouraged by the growing momentum among member states and civil society to advocate and address these injustices. We echo the core group's call for inclusive legal frameworks, robust accountability mechanisms, and the sharing of best practices to ensure that intersex persons are not left behind. We wish to indicate that South Africa is the first country to include intersex persons in its anti-discrimination law, the promotion of equality and prevention of Unfair Discrimination Act. We also have a specific law for legal gender recognition, the Alteration of Sex Description and Sex Status Act. South Africa continues to engage with national stakeholders, including
Merci,
intersex-led organizations.
Shadow.
Thank you. I call on Colombia. President, Colombia recognizes the importance of this topic for the protection of human dignity and ensuring human rights, and we welcome the panelists' presentations, which enrich our debate and lend visibility to realities faced by intersex persons around the world. Our country has created a Ministry for Equality and Equity, which contains a dedicated structure for the rights of LGBTIQ+ persons. In 2025, the first public policy with an intersectional approach for this group was adopted in order to promote actions to remove structural barriers and improve access to justice, healthcare, and education, and to combat prejudice and ensure that there are no medical procedures without consent that are performed on children. Ensuring bodily autonomy is another goal, and Colombia reaffirms its commitment to substantive equality, which recognizes diversity and equality and the autonomy of all persons, including those with innate variations of their sexual characteristics. It is also crucial to bolster international cooperation and work with international organizations, civil society, and intersex communities. It is only through joint efforts that we can eradicate harmful practices and create inclusive and respectful societies that respect human diversity. Thank you. Thank you. I give the floor to Brazil.
Mr. President, distinguished panelists, Brazil thanks the panelists for their presentations and stands firm in its commitment to combating discrimination, violence, and harmful practices against intersex persons. We welcome the Council's decision to begin addressing the rights of intersex persons, an issue Brazil has supported. In Brazil, the Ministry of Human Rights has established in 2023 an intersex working group composed also of civil society representatives with the purpose of, 1, conducting a national mapping of data on variations in intersex characteristics, 2, discussing regional, national, international strategies for combating violations of the physical and psychological integrity of intersex persons, and 3, proposing public policies for promoting and defending the rights of intersex persons, including the right to the highest attainable standard of physical and mental health, and the right to privacy, dignity, bodily integrity, and bodily autonomy. We are glad to see the Brazilian initiative reflected in the office's report, as well as the reference to the cooperation of the OHCHR with Brazilian civil society organizations to promote the rights of intersex persons through the United Nations Free, Equal, and campaign, including training, advocacy, and awareness-raising campaigns addressing stigma, harmful practices, workplace inclusion, and access to healthcare. Brazil remains dedicated to advancing these efforts, ensuring a society where the dignity and human rights of all intersex persons are fully respected and protected. Thank you.
Merci, je donne
Thank you. I give the floor to the WHO.
Thank you, Mr. President. Intersex people face discrimination and stigma in health systems, including institutional violence and forced medical interventions, while many intersex variations pose no threat to physical health. Elective procedures in infants and children with intersex variations that are not medically necessary can result in lifelong physical and mental health harm, including irreversible sterility. A recent WHO-led systematic review of the medical literature found that studies either provided no rationale for the timing or conduct of early so-called sex-normalizing surgeries or explained these in relation to a combination of concerns. These concerns were often driven by parental desires, binary sex and gender norms, and misconceptions of the relationship between sex characteristics and gender identity development. Consequently, many interventions reported in the studies were rationalized with respect to normalizing both the cosmetic alignment of anatomy with sex assigned at birth and future sexual functioning. Delaying such procedures until the individual can actively participate in decision-making and give free, informed consent is known to significantly reduce harm. Intersex persons have the right to access to healthcare free from coercion, discrimination, and violence. The right to bodily autonomy and the highest attainable standard of health must be upheld for all. Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you. I will now move on to the list of national human rights institutions and NGOs.
The Human Rights Commission of Zimbabwe.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. The Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission welcomes the report by the Office of the High Commission on Human Rights on discrimination against intersex persons. In 2019, the Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission, in its report on the National Inquiry on Access to Documentation in Zimbabwe, highlighted some of the challenges faced by intersex persons who constitute 2% of Zimbabwe's population, that is in accessing national documentation. The Commission noted the lack of recognition of intersex persons due to the operating framework, which is based on binary sex categories. The Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission therefore produced a policy brief and advocacy paper on the rights of intersex persons, which was well received in Zimbabwe by various stakeholders, including the government, developing partners, and civil society. The Commission wishes to congratulate the government of Zimbabwe for taking positive steps to address this overdue human rights issue on intersex recognition and the protection and promotion of the rights of intersex persons. The Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission particularly acknowledges and applauds the efforts by the Ministry of Justice, Legal and Parliamentary Affairs in its assessment of the legal and policy gaps relating to the rights and protection of intersex persons. The Commission also equally salutes the intersex community of Zimbabwe for its courageous leadership in this. The government of Zimbabwe, through this Ministry of Justice, has held consultative meetings in July 2025.
Thank you. I would like to give the floor to the Human Rights Commission of the Philippines for a video statement.
Assalamu alaikum. The Commission on Human Rights of the Philippines welcomes this panel on discrimination and violence against intersex people. National human rights institutions play a crucial role in advancing the rights of intersex people in three important ways. First, by supporting legislation and policies that recognize their rights and address the multiple and intersecting forms of discrimination they face. In the Philippines, the Commission is supporting the passage of the Kagandahan Bill. The Kagandahan Bill aims to simplify the legal processes for intersex individuals to change their sex and names in the civil register without a court order, therefore promoting inclusivity. Second, by amplifying the voices and lived experiences of intersex persons and consistently calling for the protection and promotion of their rights. While Jeff successfully fought for recognition through the Supreme Court, most intersex people remain excluded, forced to endure stigma, discrimination, and costly judicial processes. Third, by working closely with intersex communities and organizations, building bridges with duty bearers, and enhancing efforts to combat discrimination and violence. The Commission remains committed to being a steadfast advocate of LGBTQI rights, supporting reforms, amplifying voices, and working to ensure that intersex individuals are fully recognized and protected under the law. Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you. I would like to give the floor to Women Deliver. This is a video message.
Thank you, Mr. President. I speak as an intersex person from Kenya. The report before this council rightly highlights the global violations that we face as intersex persons. However, they are not just statistics, they are our daily reality. Intersex children still face discrimination driven by harmful beliefs that label them as castes. They are subjected to harmful non-consensual genital mutilation surgery in infancy that leave them with lifelong trauma, infertility, and mental health struggles. In schools, nearly 90% of intersex students in East Africa drop out of school due to stigma. In healthcare, we are treated as learning subjects rather than patients and often denied essential services. Despite progress like the Children Act 2022 and the drafted Intersex Bill 2023, implementation remains weak. We urge the state to prohibit non-consensual medical practices, include innate sex characteristics in anti-discrimination laws, ensure stigma-free access to education and healthcare, and support intersex-led organizations. Our call is simple: respect our bodily autonomy and our rights to live free from violence and discrimination. Thank you.
Merci. Je donne la
Thank you. I give the floor to International Planned Parenthood Federation. This is a joint statement.
Thank you, Mr. President. This statement is drafted jointly with OII Europe, the European Intersex Umbrella Organization. We welcome the landmark adoption of the first resolution focusing on the human rights of intersex persons by this Council last year and the realization of this historic panel. They give a statement to the progress made by states and international organizations driven by intersex human rights defenders and civil society actors towards the protection, promotion, and fulfillment of the human rights of intersex persons. Nevertheless, intersex people across all regions consistently face violation of their human rights to health, bodily autonomy and integrity, freedom from violence and discrimination, including in medical settings, and of the rights of the child. Intersex infants are still subjected to intersex genital mutilation. Hate speech and hate-motivated violence against intersex people are on the rise. Discrimination at school, in the workplace, in sports, and other areas of life persist. Reports like the one presented are a call for meaningful legal and policy change. Increase of knowledge about the situation of intersex people of all ages and continuous cross-country good practice exchange have proven to be key for progress and better protection. We call on UN member states to now take the next steps towards a full realization of intersex persons' human rights, starting by implementing the recommendations of the OHRC as report presented, with the full and meaningful participation of intersex-led organizations. Thank you.
Merci. Je donne la parole.
Thank you. I would like to give the floor to Frontline AIDS.
Thank you. I speak on behalf of Solace Initiative, a grassroots human rights organization in Ghana. We welcome the High Commissioner's report on discriminatory laws, violence, and human rights practices against intersex persons. Globally, intersex people face stigma, medically unnecessary interventions without consent, and barriers to justice. In Ghana, intersex persons face grave challenges. Some cultural beliefs mean that some infants are killed at birth, while others are forced into irreversible surgeries without consent, leaving lasting pain and trauma. With no clear legal protection and little training for healthcare workers, abuse and discrimination are compounded. We are advocating for constitutional reform so that the Article 12 and 17 better protect intersex persons. We are also expanding litigation supports for intersex children, drawing into the Kenyan precedents that affirm their dignity and equality. Through our REACT monitoring tool and emergency hotline, we have provided lifeline for survivors of stigma, discrimination, and gender-based violence while documenting violations nationwide. Urgent action is needed, stronger legal protections, an end to harmful practices, and recognition of rights and dignity of all people, including intersex persons. Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you. I give the floor to COC Netherlands for a joint statement.
Thank you, Mr. President. I speak today as an intersex person from Africa. We exist everywhere, yet our lives are hidden behind shame and fear. Across our communities, intersex children still undergo irreversible, medically unnecessary surgeries and hormones without informed consent. Young intersex people are bullied out of school, excluded from sports, pushed into poverty. Intersex adults face police extortion, workplace discrimination, and barriers to healthcare. Violence follows us from clinic to classroom to streets. This is why we welcome this landmark report. The Council can help to end these violations of our human rights. We urge states to prohibit non-consensual, non-urgent medical procedures and provide truth, apology, and reparations. Ensure legal protection from discrimination to healthcare, education, sports, and detention. Train healthcare workers and adopt care pathway grounded in bodily autonomy and evidence. Fund community-led services, shelter and mental health support, and ethical data that protect intersex human rights defenders with safe reporting as access to justice. We are not disordered to be fixed. We are people, families, and future to be cherished. Let every child leave the hospital with dignity and choice intact. I thank you.
Merci.
Thank you. That marks the end of our first segment of the list of speakers. We'll move on to the second, and I'd like to give the floor to the United Kingdom.
Thank you, Mr. President. The UK welcomes this important panel discussion. We recognise that all individuals, regardless of their sex characteristics, are entitled to dignity, respect, and the full enjoyment of their human rights. Yet we remain concerned by the persistent reports of discrimination and violence, including in medical settings, faced by intersex persons in many parts of the world. These practices can have lifelong impacts on physical and mental health, as many have outlined today, and undermine the fundamental principle that everyone should be able to make informed decisions about their bodies. We note the progress being made to protect intersex persons, including in Africa and other regions. We must learn from these experiences and listen to those directly affected, ensuring that their voices continue to be central to policy development. The UK looks forward to further discussions in the Council of Europe on how we can collectively improve laws and policies that uphold the dignity and respect of all people, including those with variations in sex characteristics. We are committed to working with our international partners to promote inclusive approaches, challenge harmful stereotypes, and ensure that no one is left behind. Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you. I give the floor to Cyprus.
Mr. President, Cyprus thanks the High Commissioner for a report that exposes in stark terms the grave violations faced by intersex persons worldwide. It is intolerable that still today, children continue to be subjected to medically unnecessary and irreversible interventions without their consent, that adults are denied access to justice and to their own medical records, and that discrimination, violence, and even infanticide remain a reality. This report reminds us that these practices are not medical necessities, but harmful acts rooted in stereotypes, stigma, and the refusal to accept that human diversity. They constitute serious violations of the rights to dignity, bodily integrity, and non-discrimination. We must do better. Cyprus calls on all states to explicitly prohibit harmful medical practices, to guarantee equal protection under the law on the basis of sex characteristics, and to ensure that intersex persons have full access to justice, healthcare, education, and opportunities free from stigma. Above all, the voices of intersex persons themselves must guide us. Their leadership and lived experiences are indispensable in shaping laws and policies that safeguard autonomy and dignity. Mr. President, Cyprus reaffirms its unwavering commitment to stand against all forms of discrimination and to work for a world where no person is made invincible because of who they are. Thank you.
Merci. Je donne la parole à la...
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Albania.
Thank you, Mr. President. Intersex persons continue to face discrimination, violence, and medical unnecessary intervention that compromise their bodily integrity and well-being. It is therefore our collective responsibility to ensure that legal systems, health protocols, and social policies fully respect the principles of non-discrimination, bodily autonomy, and informed consent. Protecting intersex persons is not only a matter of health and law, it is a matter of human dignity and human rights. In Albania, reforms adopted in 2020 introduced a medical protocol restricting surgical intervention on intersex infants strictly to cases of medical necessity. In the same year, Albania amended the law on protection from discrimination to explicitly include sex characteristics as a protected ground. These steps illustrate how combining legal protection with medical safeguards can advance equality in practice. Mr. President, intersex persons, like all persons, must live free from discrimination, violence, and harmful practices. Let us build on the best practices shared on today's discussion and continue to strengthen international cooperation on this matter. I thank you.
Merci. Je donne la...
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Germany.
Mr. President, Germany welcomes today's panel discussion, and I also would like to thank the OHCHR for its report. Germany condemns and opposes discrimination and harmful practices against persons who are born with sex characteristics that do not fit binary notions of male and female bodies. For too long, the existence of intersex persons has forcibly been made invisible. Medically unnecessary and non-consensual interventions continue to be prevalent. The physical and mental consequences of such forced treatments are long-lasting and often devastating. As mentioned in the report, Germany first introduced a national law to protect children from such unneeded interventions in 2021. We are determined to help others and to help also end such harmful practices globally. We also remain committed to further improve the broader human rights situation of intersex persons who still face many different forms of discrimination in their everyday lives, as we heard from civil society organizations today. In closing, I would like to ask the panelists what more we can do to improve the mental and physical health of intersex persons throughout their entire life course, maybe elaborating on the holistic and comprehensive approach that was mentioned by the panel. Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Mexico.
Gracias, señor.
Thank you, President. We recognize that a lack of legal protection for intersex persons begins with a lack of disaggregated data. And this is why Mexico has begun collating data on our intersex population. And we've done this through our national survey on sexual and gender diversity. Pursuant to this, nearly 1.5 million persons in Mexico born with a sex characteristics variation. Regrettably, more than 20% say that they've suffered discrimination. In order to combat this discrimination, as well as having a comprehensive human rights legal framework, we've developed specific tools. Amongst them, we first of all have a protocol so that legal sentences can be handed down with an approach that is respectful of sexual orientation, identity, and gender and sexual characteristics. This guides judges to protect intersex children from unnecessary surgical procedures. We also have a protocol ensuring discrimination-free access to healthcare services for LGBTI persons, ensuring that medical care is provided in absolute respect of bodily autonomy. We thank the panelists for their presentations, and we'd like to ask them about good practices they've identified in education in order to combat discrimination against intersex children. Thank you.
Merci. Je donne la parole à la
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Spain. Thank you, President. Spain aligns itself with a statement made by the EU, and we thank panelists for their presentations, and we welcome the High Commissioner's report. We recognize the work that this Council has done to respect the rights and to prohibit discrimination of intersex persons. As its report says, Spain is one of the pioneering countries in terms of providing legal protection for intersex persons. Law 4 of 2023 lays down that healthcare for intersex persons will be carried out on the basis of the principles of autonomy, informed decision and consent, non-discrimination, comprehensive care, quality, specialization, proximity, and non-segregation, ensuring that we don't pathologize persons. It's a regulation which has prohibited genital modification in persons under 12, except in cases where their healthcare protection requires it. And we have really tried to approach surgical intervention in this approach. We're aware that we need a specific focus in combating discrimination, and this we prohibit any discrimination based on sex characteristics, and we want to ensure full implementation of these policies. We would like to ask the panelists what other structural changes and what successful public policies have contributed to ensuring that intersex persons can live a life with dignity. Thank you.
Merci. Je donne la parole.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Cuba.
Presidente.
President, we'd like to thank the panelists for their presentations and for the first time, the fact that the Council is holding a debate on this issue. As a commitment to our promotion and protection of human rights for all persons, including persons that require the greatest protection, the Constitution of Cuba prohibits discrimination on any grounds. And our laws, constitution, and other regulations prohibit discrimination. We have developed a lot of law to protect sexual and reproductive health rights in recent years. We've approved a family code and a code on childhood and adolescence. In 2024, we had a first Cuban consensus on intersexuality promoted by the Multisexual Cuban Society. We approach these issues from a multidisciplinary perspective, and we had contributions from very many different sectors, surgery, psychologists, psychiatrists, and persons and families affected. We are working with healthcare professionals to ensure that we keep updating our national legislation, and we want to address all types of variances, especially when people are born with genital variations. We are committed to protecting the rights of intersex persons as part of our humanist vocation as a country. Thank you.
Merci. Je donne la parole au distingué.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Venezuela. Thank you very much, President. We welcome the presentations made by the distinguished panelists. We emphasize that in Article 19 of our Constitution, we guarantee that any person pursuant to the principle of no discrimination enjoys the inalienable, indivisible, independent exercise of human rights. Our Article 21 says that all persons are equal before the law, and that means that we permit no discrimination on the grounds of race, sex, or any other grounds. So we ensure that there is enjoyment of rights for everyone. The Venezuelan state has therefore set up and strengthened various institutions to guarantee this rights. We have a Deputy Ministry for Equality and Non-Discrimination, which is the body that mainstreams a gender perspective in our public policies. We also add to this the organic law of our homeland plan, which includes one pillar on protection and social development as a way of eradicating all forms of inequality, discrimination, and sexual and gender violence. These are just some of the laws and policies put in place by our state to guarantee the promotion, protection, and full enjoyment of human rights in Venezuela. And we hope that these will contribute to the discussion we're having on these topics today. Thank you.
Merci. Je donne la...
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Uruguay. Thank you very much, President. We thank the panelists for their presentations, and we also welcome the report from the High Commissioner's Office. As we learn from the Universal Declaration on Human Rights and the different human rights instruments, intersex persons, just like any other person, have a right to protection, respect, and the enjoyment of all their human rights. We're concerned at the cases of infanticide detailed in the report, as well as the unnecessary medical procedures carried out without the full, free, informed consent of persons affected. We believe states must guarantee the rights of intersex persons to health and physical and mental integrity. In Uruguay, laws and public policies protect intersex persons from discrimination, and we promote the recognition of their human rights. At the same time, legislation prohibits non-consensual medical procedures on children and adolescents. President, we echo the recommendations in the report, and we would urge this Council to continue to tackle human rights violations and abuses against intersex persons and address its underlying causes. Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you. We come back to the list of national human rights institutions and NGO speakers, and I give the floor to Ilga World.
Mr. President, distinguished delegates, my name is Crystal, a proud intersex woman from South Africa. ILGA World welcomes the OHRC report on discriminatory laws, violence, and harmful practices against intersex persons. We thank the High Commissioner for centering intersex voices in this historic work, and we also welcome the panel discussion as a vital space to reflect on its findings. The report confirms what intersex communities have long denounced. Worldwide, intersex people face harmful medical interventions without consent, discrimination in education, employment, and sports, and persistent invisibility in law and policy. Stigma and stereotypes continue to deny intersex people dignity, equality, and bodily autonomy. As highlighted both in the report and by today's panel, urgent action is needed. States must prohibit unnecessary medical interventions on children, ensure accountability for past violations, and provide truth, justice, and reparations. Explicit legal protections must be adopted, and data collections must protect visibility while upholding human rights. This discussion underscores that intersex rights are inseparable from gender equality, sexual and reproductive health rights, and freedom from torture. Addressing them is not optional, it's a binding obligation. Mr. President, we call on all states to act decisively on these recommendations in close partnerships with intersex organizations. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to Action Canada for Population and Development.
Thank you, President. Action Canada joins Interaction for Health and Human Rights and Sexual Rights Initiative in this statement. We congratulate OHCHR for the report and all panelists for their interventions. Today is a historic day for intersex people everywhere. I am Executive Director of an Australian intersex organisation. We are proud of the role that Australia played in this process and of the progress made by the Australian Capital Territory in implementing reforms to protect many intersex people from harmful practices in medical settings. We hope the report will support effective change in Australia and around the world. Intersex people have been historically pathologized or disordered by medicine. The best interests of children has been manipulated to justify practices to alter their bodies in line with gender and sexual stereotypes. Loose concepts of medical necessity rely on social and cultural norms rather than urgent necessity. Member states must enact laws to prevent harmful practices in medical settings and to ensure their victims have access to support, truth, and reparations. Member states must support intersex-led organizations to provide psychosocial and healthcare services to their communities and to keep engaging in human rights work. Thank you.
Merci, je donne la parole.
Thank you. I give the floor to Human Rights Watch.
Mr. President, Human Rights Watch thanks the High Commissioner for this important report and calls on states to urgently implement its recommendations. For decades, medical professionals and policymakers have ignored the voices of intersex people, consistently failing to respect the right to full, free, and informed consent before their bodies are irreversibly altered. Some argue that early childhood surgeries reduce stigma and promote normalcy, that they help children develop cisgender heterosexual identities through bodies that appear more typical. But these claims lack scientific support. In fact, the widespread adoption of these procedures occurred without evidence of benefit, only to later reveal extensive harm. These surgeries often create the very stigma and dysphoria they aim to prevent and can result in lifelong physical and psychological consequences. A human rights framework is essential to ending these practices. International human rights bodies, including UN treaty bodies, have repeatedly found that these interventions violate fundamental rights. We welcome recent progress in banning or regulating such surgeries, including in Greece, Malta, Spain, and parts of India and Australia. We're also encouraged by the growing number of medical associations worldwide that now oppose non-consensual surgeries aimed at normalizing children's bodies. All people, including those with intersex traits, deserve the right to bodily autonomy and dignity. This starts with allowing children to grow up in their own healthy, if different bodies, without being subjected to harmful, irreversible interventions. Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you. I give the floor to Outright Action International.
Hello, my name is Kimberly Zieselman, and I'm an intersex woman from Outright International. We are based in the United States, but support the protection of intersex human rights across the globe. In every single country, intersex children face irreversible physical and emotional harm. This harm is caused by genital surgeries that are recognized by international experts as torture that is carried out in medical settings. It is also caused by the abuse and abandonment, in some cases by family members who do not accept their intersex child, and in some cases, even we see infanticide. There are many misunderstandings about intersex people. Intersex is not an identity. It is our actual physical bodies that we are born with. Kids like me, those born with atypical physical traits, are not a problem to be fixed. With appropriate human rights compliant care and support, we live fully and thrive. For us to thrive, however, we must stop the societal and governmental sanctioned violence against infants and children simply for being born with bodies that others perceive as unacceptable. I call upon every person, diplomat, human rights defenders, religious persons, family members, and medical practitioners, anybody that cares about children and access to healthcare, and all people being free from violence, to join our global movement to end this senseless and preventable harm. Thank you.
Merci. Je donne la parole.
Thank you. I give the floor to Sambali Trust for a video statement.
Discrimination and violence against intersex people are more than statistics, they are personal tragedies that echo through our communities. Today, millions of intersex people face rejection, invisibility, and trauma simply because of who they are. We gather here not just to address injustice but to rebuild hope, create belonging, and insist that dignity is everyone's birthright. In Jodhpur, Sambhali Trust Garima project is lighting the way. The Garima Center is a space where intersex and other gender diverse individuals come not only for shelter but to reclaim their sense of self. People arrive hurt and isolated, and at Garima, they find open arms, professional supports, and a community that listens, believes, and heals. Garima has empowered over 1,680 individuals through counselings, workshops, and support networks. Each session, each gathering is more than an event, it's a celebration of courage, a testament to resilience, and a promise that no one will face their challenges alone. Through every story shared at Garima, we see how acceptance and kindness transform lives and how love can make survivors into role models for change. Mr. President, Sambhali Trust deeply appreciates the United Nations commitment to human rights. We urge the UN to amplify and strengthen protection for intersex people, to listen more closely to grassroots voices, and to partner with local change makers like Garima. Together we can build a future where compassion conquers discrimination.
Merci. Je donne la parole.
Thank you. I give the floor to RSKS for a video statement.
Mr. President, across the world, intersex persons continue to face discrimination, stigma, harmful practices simply because of their natural variations in sex characteristics. Many are subjected to unnecessary medical interventions without consent, denied bodily autonomy, and silenced by social taboos. Such practices violate the core principles of human rights, dignity, equality, and freedom. So-called normalizing surgeries are harmful practices. They violate the rights to bodily autonomy, physical integrity, and self-determination, while causing lasting physical and psychological trauma. Mr. President, every person has the right to be recognized, respected, and to live free from discrimination. States, civil society, and international mechanisms must work together to end harmful practices and adopt rights-based approaches that safeguard bodily integrity and choice. We call on all stakeholders to ensure access to healthcare that respects autonomy and dignity, promote awareness campaigns that challenge stigma and affirm diversity, strengthen legal protections that guarantee equality and justice for intersex persons. Mr. President, advancing the rights of intersex persons is not about tolerance. It is about justice, dignity, and humanity. Let us commit to building a world where every person can live with pride and without fear. Thank you.
Merci. Nous avons épuisé le.
Thank you. We have now concluded the second speaker's slot. I can now return the floor to the panelists so that they can deliver their concluding remarks. You have 3 minutes each. Mr. Yuri de Boer, you have the floor first, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thanks to all those who intervened. In response and in conclusion, the Council of Europe would like to call upon member states to align national law and clinical practice with the forthcoming recommendation, prohibit non-consensual interventions, build independent oversight, and provide access to justice and redress, while recognizing that approaches to implementation may vary in the light of different national frameworks. Ensure that sex characteristics are included across equality, hate crime, and hate speech frameworks. Invest in lifelong rights-based care and integrate inclusive education, labor and sports policies, to resource organizations working on intersex issues and embed participation in every stage, design, implementation, and monitoring, and promote recognition of human rights and safeguard the dignity of intersex persons. I invite our regional and international partners to deepen interregional cooperation so that standards, jurisprudence, and clinical guidance move in the same direction from this, as some have said, historic date today. In response to the question from Austria on behalf of a number of states, I would invite Austria and those other Council of Europe member states to make full use of the appropriate intergovernmental avenues, including the Council of Europe's expert committee that I chair, for learning and exchange, and consider using the technical support offered by the Council of Europe towards implementing standards. I invite you all to take note of the explanatory memorandum to the draft recommendation for examples of existing promising practices across sectors, including education, recognizing the question there from, I believe, Mexico. The Council of Europe and our expert committee stand ready with guidance, learning, and legislative support to make these standards real in people's lives. Thank you very much.
Merci. Je donne la parole.
Thank you. I now give the floor to Andrea Albagli Irureta-Goyena. You have the floor, ma'am.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, sir. As a country, we welcome the UN's commitment as testified by this debate, which is a historic event for intersex persons. We also welcome the cross-cutting support for the human rights of intersex persons that states have expressed during this panel discussion. Let me conclude on the challenges that we face as a state in ensuring the full implementation of the rights of intersex persons in order to support countries that want to follow our path. We have to think about clinical procedures. All of them must be based on evidence. They must be based on the well-being of the patient, not on cosmetic reasons or social considerations. And there must be support for families and individuals in making decisions, and there must be psychosocial support approved. We also provide follow-up where every stakeholder has to ensure coherent action. We also want to identify procedures normally applied to intersex persons and identify cases of possible violations, working together with public authorities, ensuring there is oversight and follow-up of any cases. And to conclude, our state reaffirms its commitment to work together with civil society so that we can identify their experience in applying the circular. We want to identify areas which are of relevance to intersex persons, and we want to do this with a comprehensive health-based approach. Thank you.
Merci, je donne la parole.
Thank you. And I give the floor to Jeff Kugandahan, who will be the last speaker.
I'm here today with a sense of urgency and hope. As we face an opportunity for profound change, intersex persons have been long silenced, misunderstood, and denied the rights that every human being deserves. But today, I call upon the states to take meaningful action. The time has come for tolerance and understanding to be backed by real action. Intersex persons are not anomalies. We are human beings with natural variations in sex characteristics. These variations are common as differences in hair color or skin tone. Yet